Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to our webinar on Election Day. I hope you're having a great day. I hope this is an awesome opportunity for you to take a break, think about a different topic for a little while, enjoy yourself, learn something new. My name is Megan Remington. I'm our Community Education Coordinator at Coconino Community College. I'm actually coming to you from my house because the CCC Lone Tree campus in Flagstaff is a polling location. So out of respect for the fact that there are a ton of people in the building, not a ton of people, I'm sure we're social distancing, but because we're gonna have folks in the building, we're all working from home today. So welcome to my house. So I just have a couple quick things to tell you before we get started. So for starters, if you've never been in a webinar before, just so you know, you aren't able to speak or turn on video. So if you have any questions, you can either put them in the chat box or you can utilize the Q&A function. That's a great place to put questions. We'll handle questions at the very end, but if someone asks something that seems relevant in the moment, I'll pop in and make sure that Ken hears you. We do have a couple more Comet Talks coming up to close out 2020. So one of them was actually exactly 1 week from today. We're going to have a Comet Talk with the Coconino Center for the Arts. They have a really cool art exhibit called Parched that has started. And we're going to have a talk with the folks who put that entire exhibit together. It's going to be a lot of fun. Same day, same time next week. We're also going to be bringing back the National Park Service on December 2nd at 6 p.m. We're talking about archaeology. So that's going to be a fun one too. I'll send out links for both of those if you are interested. We hope to see you there. And if you have already had the opportunity to opt into our emails, I'm going to be sending out an email probably on Thursday this week with some information about upcoming classes. We're going to be doing a cooking class this coming Thursday. Going to be super fun. I'm excited about it. It's with Chris Kalinich with Plant to Platter, and she's fabulous. She's going to put together a great program for us. We're going to do some holiday fun to get everybody in the holiday spirit, even when we're socially distanced. Hope to have you there. And of course, we're going to talk about 2021. It's going to be great. And with that, I took less than 5 minutes. I'm super proud of myself. With that, Ken, I am going to go ahead and turn off my video and get out of the way. And you are welcome to take over from here.
Thank you very much. My name is Ken Hyde. I'm Chief of Science and Resource Management at Glen Canyon National Recreation Area and Rainbow Bridge National Monument. I've worked all over the United States, and for the last 4.5 years, I've been working here in northern Arizona, and of course our park goes clear up into southern Utah. We have quite a few different natural resource and cultural resource issues and everything, so I'm really honored today to have this time to spend a little bit of your time to share a new program that we have started up, one that's fairly unique to our park because we are a national recreation area, and Congress gave us a few more options on managing fish and wildlife and some of the other resources. So today I'd like to talk to you about our new Brown Trout Incentivized Harvest program. It's an opportunity to help us manage a fish species that's of concern to us, and hopefully this webinar will give you a little bit of information as to why we are concerned and how we put together a program where we're really asking for anglers to help us in the management of a non-game species. So want to thank some of our partners, the Glen Canyon Conservancy, which operates quite a few of the bookstores up in this area and is also a friends group for our park. And this program is in conjunction with Arizona Game and Fish in order for us, because we both work together on managing the fish species, especially in the Colorado River. So a little bit of background. Over the last 10 years, we've been seeing a number of different threats, especially below Glen Canyon Dam in the Colorado River. And these threats have kind of come and gone over the years, But in the most recent years, we've got a little population of green sunfish. Apparently, they're able to come through the dam either through the penstocks or the bypass tubes when they're doing some of their high flow experiments in that. We're seeing a few more walleye, especially close to the base of the dam. Haven't seen a lot of them come downriver or show up in surveys downriver. Of course, the northern pike is continuing to expand in the upper Colorado River, and between it and smallmouth bass, they are really decimating some of the threatened and endangered fish species that live up there, and also having impacts on native amphibians and salamanders and other things that also use the river. But today we're going to concentrate on brown trout, and we'll go into a little more detail on how their numbers have been increasing since 2014. So quite a bit of research happens on the Colorado River, below the dam and all the way down through Grand Canyon. A big bulk of that is to keep track of and to monitor the population status of the humpback chub and the razorback sucker, which are both endangered fish species, at least currently. But in the process of doing all of that research, we also keep track of the trout populations down there and some of the other native fish species like bluehead suckers and flannelmouth suckers and some of those. As you'll see in this graph, since a lot of these records are pretty detailed from about the mid 1990s or early 1990s all the way to today. Since the 1990s, the brown trout population just below Glen Canyon Dam down to Lee's Ferry and the Paria River have just really kind of stayed in the background. They've been about 2% of the catch during all of those years up until 2014, when for a number of different reasons, which some of them we still don't understand, they really began to reproduce between the dam and Lee's Ferry in that 15 to 16 miles of river. And as of this last summer, as Arizona Game and Fish and some of the other government agencies are out doing their research, they're finding that brown trout are almost 10% of the catch, which means on a night that they're out monitoring and surveying the fish, 10% of those fish are brown trout and the other 90% are rainbow trout. So I'll go into a little bit of why brown trout just don't fit into the fishery management between Glen Canyon Dam and the Paria River. I'll go over a few of the management reasons, and then I'll talk a little bit more detail about brown trout themselves. So we at the National Park Service, which includes us and Grand Canyon, put together a comprehensive fishery management plan that we finished up in 2013. And for our portion of the river, down to the Paria River, we identified that Glen Canyon National Recreation Area really wanted to maintain the highly valued recreational rainbow trout fishery. And in the process of doing that, we also are trying to manage it in such a way so that there isn't a big out migration of rainbow trout that would go down into Grand Canyon National Park. Rainbow trout themselves can compete and also have a little bit of a predation on humpback chub, especially down around the Little Colorado River mouth. And so we want to maintain this highly valued recreational rainbow trout fishery up in our area. We are working, and as you saw on that previous slide, to prevent further introductions of non-native species. We do some work on the green sunfish every year to keep their numbers down. They are a small fish, but they are highly predatory of eggs and the very young fish of other species when they become adults. And we at the National Park Service are mandated through the Endangered Species Act to protect downriver endangered humpback chub and razorback suckers. And so we always are having to look downriver and make sure anything we do up here is not causing issues downriver. So about a year or so after that, the Arizona Game and Fish Department began a fisheries management plan, which they do for quite a few of their lakes and reservoirs and a few of their bigger rivers around the state. And they finished that up in 2015. And they identified that maintaining a healthy population of rainbow trout at Lee's Ferry to support recreational fishing was one of their major goals, and that they also wanted to continue to provide a quality trout fishing experience with a catch frequency that's commensurate with the blue ribbon status of the fishery, which means they want fishermen to be able to go out there in a given day, catch so many fish, have a very good experience. In most cases, the rainbow trout fishery is a catch and release. And so they really want to keep it in that blue ribbon status through that management. And they also, as a state agency and with state listed species, also protect the downriver humpback chub and razorback suckers. So many of you are probably aware that brown trout are a highly sought after fishing experience around the US, and that they are not native to the US. They are actually, their official English name is the German brown trout. So they were brought over from Europe. They're a bigger fish, a pretty aggressive fish once you get them on a hook and line, and so anglers really like to catch them. But in this particular stretch of the river, there are a few reasons as to why they are not a species that we really welcome and are real excited to have them start to expand. A few of the reasons, the research on this species shows that they are 17 times more likely to eat other fish than rainbow trout, especially as they become subadults and adults. They quit eating on the aquatic insects and freshwater shrimp and some of the other things that are available out there, and they really start to concentrate on eating the fish, especially of other species, though they will eat some of their own little ones too. They're better adapted to hunting other fish, and especially do better than rainbow trout in the murky waters found below the Paria River and the Little Colorado River areas. And so where rainbows, as the Colorado starts getting really murky, they tend to work their way back up above the Paria River so that they're in that cold, clear water that's coming out of the dam. Brown trout don't have that same limitation, and they are able, especially down there around the Little Colorado River, where a big population of humpback chub are, they're able to hold in there and continue to eat and hunt. There's a trout disease called whirling disease. It's been identified as being in the stretch of the river below the dam, but at least up till now, and we'll knock on wood for this, it hasn't taken off. But because it's there, brown trout are much less susceptible to this disease, and they may serve as a carrier. Because it does not kill them, they can serve as a carrier for quite a long time. So that's another concern. Brown trout are a long-lived trout species. 18 plus years they've been found to live in the wild. which is 3 to 4 times longer than your typical rainbow trout. So once they're in the system, and especially get up to those adult sizes, they will live for quite a while. Brown trout have very few predators below the dam. When they're small, you'll get some herons and osprey and a few other, mostly birds, predating on them. But once they get to that subadult and adult size, there's really not any predators that they have to worry about. So they're able to keep expanding pretty rapidly. And they also serve as a major predator of the rainbow trout, especially all of the young ones from each year's successful spawning. And so that's somewhat of a concern. Brown trout can tolerate and successfully spawn in warmer river waters. So as we experience climate change, very warm summers, lowering of some of the reservoirs, especially Lake Powell, and warmer water coming through the dam, brown trout are going to do better in that. And then lastly, they are very mobile. They're able to move a long ways up and down rivers. And in fact, in their native range of Germany and Europe, many of them will migrate to the ocean and back, very similar to what we see our steelhead do, especially along the Pacific coast in the United States. So hopefully that gives you some ideas on why they are a management concern. Starting in 2017, the National Park Service put together an expanded non-native aquatic species management plan for the river, which was kind of in addition to that comprehensive fish management plan that I had talked about earlier, where we really concentrated on non-natives, whether it was fish species, bullfrog, there's a whole array of crayfish that could be a real concern if they got established down in the river. And so we focused a lot on those. In the process of looking at what the options were for a large predatory fish like a brown trout, we put together kind of a toolbox. And in that toolbox, we have 3 different tiers of tools. And I've just focused on some of the major ones here. So the incentivized harvest and a rewards program was identified as what everyone, especially on the public reviews and everything, really felt that was the most acceptable tool to try first. And that it's also the least intrusive. We're not doing anything other than maybe increasing the amount of fishing that's going on. Some of the later tiers would be, in the case of a brown trout, and they tend to spawn from November, which they actually probably started about last week as we had that cold front come through. They'll spawn from November to January, and there are opportunities to go out there and kind of disrupt, to stir up the gravels where they may be laying their eggs and everything, so that those eggs float down the river and are eaten by other predators. And then the last tier is a mechanical removal program, which has been used in the past, both on the Colorado River and on a number of other fish populations. And we're really trying to stay away from that third tier because of it disrupting the rainbow trout habitat at the same time and their populations, and just the impacts that it might have on especially our rainbow trout fishery. So the incentivized harvest, we'll talk a little more now on the details. Because of COVID-19 and the up and down numbers in Arizona, especially, we finally just had to pick a date. And so we picked November 11th, 2020, to kick this program off, to get the word out, and especially because it also falls during the spawning period for brown trout, it's one of the best times, at least known right now, for catching the larger fish as they come into some of the spawning beds. There will be a reward paid to anglers for each harvested brown trout. And we had to just set a certain size. So we set 6 inches and larger. We will have the anglers just turn in the head and the entrails for the fish. And then, of course, are able to take the body of the fish home and enjoy a pretty good meal of trout. And starting the program out, just a little bit higher than some of the other programs scattered around the United States. We are going to start out paying $25 per fish that is harvested, with a possible increase during the summer months when angling tends to fall off. Plus, a lot of people haven't fished for brown trout during the summer, so they're going to have to go figure out where they are hanging out, what kind of baits not baits, but kind of lures and that they might take. And so there will be a kind of a learning process. And so we have a few incentives as far as some of those months when people wouldn't typically be fishing. We did have hopes, and it's part of the program, is to have some sponsored fishing tournaments where they concentrate on brown trout. Some awards are given out for, the biggest fish, the most brown trout, the most pounds of brown trout, that type of thing, similar to what they do on many of the other programs, and especially on some of the lakes and reservoirs where they're concentrating on a specific species of fish that they want to get rid of, or not get rid of, but concentrate on and knock the population down. Those fishing tournaments can have a good effect on that. And then we also have a program set up with all of our work with the tribes of the region to do some youth-sponsored fishing trips where we would pay for most of the costs and allow tribal youth to come in and have a day of fishing in an area that's considered significant. And in some places, those canyons are considered a very sacred area for some of the tribes. So that is also, both of those programs were delayed. We're hoping to kick those into gear going into 2021, probably towards next fall. So the funding and research, this is really a research program. The incentivized harvest, we have to see, does it work? Does it work in a river the size of the Colorado River? Does it work on a population that's already doing pretty good and has had several years where they've spawned? We were able to obtain some National Park Service funding and some Bureau of Reclamation funding to really fund the program well in 2021. And then we have some partial funding set up for the following 3 years so that we can get 3 to 4 years of good research on how this works. Is it meeting our goals? And is it feasible to continue to keep doing on into the future? So the goal for the program is to reduce the brown trout population, hopefully back to about those 2013 levels, where it was the brown trout represented about 2% of the fish caught during research and monitoring. This program does not have the goal to eliminate the brown trout population. It's really not feasible and is just not a goal. We know they've always been there and kind of been in the background since they were introduced years and years ago. So we are not working to eliminate them. And the last thing that we really want to see work is if the incentivized harvest and anglers helping us reduce brown trout populations is effective, that should eliminate the need for us to have to use some of those more intensive fish management tools, the tier 2 and tier 3 tools, because we are seeing impacts to humpback chub downriver. So we're really hoping to keep that population low so we don't have to use those other tools. A few of the specifics on the program, you'll see up in the upper left-hand corner, there's two little cards. We're going to do a little survey card and angler information card that allows us to, of course, make a payment at the end of each month for any and all fish turned in by a particular angler. It also gives us some information on where the fish was caught. They can actually look on the little map, which will be on the back side of the card, and give us at least an idea where they're catching the fish. And then just a little bit of social science information about the anglers so that we get an idea on are there other groups of anglers that we could concentrate on or focus on to invite them to also participate. Our friends at the Glen Canyon Conservancy are the ones who operate the Navajo Bridge Visitor Center. Hopefully some of you have been able to stop in and see that. It's a wonderful little facility. They're going to have one of these funky freezers with a hood on it set up so that an angler walks up, drops the bag with the fish head, the entrails, and the data card all slipped into it. And they drop it right into that freezer so that we can collect them and then at the end of the month be able to make a payment. We'll have 2 or 3 information areas set up down at the Lee's Ferry boat ramp area. We have a fish cleaning station just off of the edge of the long-term parking there. And we'll also have some little information areas near the dock and near the ramp so that anglers can get the bags that they need, be able to fill things out, and then just drop things off at the Navajo Bridge Visitor Center as they're going out of the park. A few of the rules, I'll go through these fairly quick. Brown trout must be harvested legally. So those of you who grew up throwing dynamite into the pond to get fish out, that's not legal, so don't plan on doing that. Harvested between the dam and they go down, we go down to the Paria River riffle, so that's the area where we're concentrating on. The anglers register by turning in the brown trout heads and the entrails, and I'll just give you a real quick background. The reason we're asking for the entrails which is the innards of the fish, is because in a lot of the brown and rainbow trout that are out in the river, they have had a small little pit tag inserted into them during those research and monitoring activities over the last several years. Those little pit tags can be scanned, and then it identifies that trout when it was first pick tagged, where it was first pick tagged, its size, say 3 or 4 years ago, and how much it's grown in the last 3. So those little pit tags are really important, and the researchers insert these so that they kind of float around in there between the intestines and everything. And so we're going to have the entrails turned in so that we can run those through scanners and collect any of that information. Again, we're asking that the brown trout be 6 inches or longer, and that they only come from this stretch of the river. We know brown trout are in other areas around the state. We can determine where the fish are from, and if there's any suspect fish turned in, we can go and determine where they came from. As part of the program and the funding that we obtain, we're able to provide the plastic bags, printed data cards. We've printed a bunch of rack cards, and also metal posters that are scattered around with information. So we believe we'll be able to keep everyone informed as far as what to do. They'll be deposited again into that freezer at the Navajo Bridge Visitor Center. The employees of the National Park Service, because we are providing the funding for this program, cannot participate. And all of the brown trout heads and entrails will be tallied at the end of each month. And then a check will be mailed by the Glen Canyon Conservancy. And we really aren't looking to pay for all of the costs for someone who might be fishing down there. But again, it's an incentive or a reward to help defray some of those costs. Lee's Ferry is fairly remote, about 2.5 hours from St. George or from Flagstaff, and probably almost 4 hours from Phoenix. So we're trying to defray some of those costs, and then a lot of the people will either have to use a boat or a kayak to get to the upper stretches of the river. And of course, they do a lot of back hauls for kayaks now, so but that involves a cost also. So we really are just trying to give enough of a reward or incentive to interest people to help us with this program. We follow all of the Arizona Game and Fish rules for this stretch of the river, which includes artificial lures and flies only. Even if they're using a treble hook, they need to be barbless hooks. An angler can catch 2 rainbow trout a day, but in the case of brown trout, you can catch as many as you possibly can in a day. Because they are not a managed fish and not a fish wanted to be in this area. And if in the process you catch a walleye or 2 or a smallmouth bass, please retain those so that we don't end up with issues with some of these other large predatory fish in the future. I have posted here some of the websites that you can go to. We will make sure that Megan has those, and when she sends out additional information on this program today, that you have all of this information, so that I'll leave it up there a little longer, so if any of you want to write it down. That's really my presentation. We're very grateful for all of the partners, Arizona Game and Fish, Glen Canyon Monitoring and Research Center, Arizona State University, the Bureau of Reclamation, the Glen Canyon Conservancy, and then there's the Adaptive Management Program for this entire stretch of the river. There's quite a number of the angling group representatives who have all really helped us to roll this new program out. And that's all.
Awesome. And it looks like we do have one question that just popped up. Alyssa wants to know, where can we go to learn how to identify the fish that we might catch for amateurs?
Very good question. And we just are finishing up printing off some posters that will be placed right next to the rules and guidelines down at Lee's Ferry, but also on our webpage, the Glen Canyon webpage. We have put up one of those cool new identifiers where as you move the little bar back and forth, you can see what an entire brown trout or half of a brown trout compared to half of a rainbow trout and everything. So that's a great place to look at those and get that first idea on how to identify them.
And I don't see any other questions written down, but I have a question. So, you were talking about how the brown trout are a problem and that you guys didn't really have a good feel for how they've become so overwhelmingly populated. But so my question is, how often does it happen where there's an invasive species, whether it's an animal or a plant or something like that? And what have you had to do in the past?
It's been a real issue with plants. You may have heard of mile-a-minute plants, the knapweeds, a lot of the big thistles that you see around are all non-native. So plants, a lot of those came in with grains brought over from Europe or grains brought over from Africa. Um, with animals, crayfish, and a lot of the diseases that come from some of these, where we wiped out all of the chestnut trees back in the 1800s and early 1900s because a Chinese blight came over and got into our chestnut trees. We lost an entire forest community. So in the case of fish, we have anglers who very much love to get to fish a lot of different things. So where a walleye is native to the Great Lakes region, some of those fishermen might have put a few in a bucket and took them over to the Columbia River and dropped them in. Or some of the state agencies even have tried trials to say, oh, I got a new reservoir here. What kind of fish might do well in here? And in the case of Lake Powell, striped bass, they put them out there just to see, oh, they might do okay. Oh man, they took off, and now you can almost unlimited fish on striped bass because there's too many of them and they're trying to knock them down. So in some cases we're our own worst enemy, and in others they just fire ants probably were in a few boxes of produce, came up from Brazil, got started down in Texas, and if you've ever been stung by a fire ant, you will remember it. New bee species are coming over all the time, and wasp species that are wiping out a lot of our honeybees and bumblebees and some of those things. So we're a worldwide economy, and because we buy and trade and then of course even pets, Florida is famous for having animals from all over the world because of its really nice climate. When a 25-foot python or boa constrictor is curled up in the motor of your car, you notice, oh, these are not what I want, but you have to remember he got 25 feet because he ate all of the native eggs and small baby birds, and all the way up to, they'll feed on baby alligators and that. So sometimes we introduce things that we really regret later. Brown trout, I will tell you, were introduced into Grand Canyon back in the 1920s.
Wow.
Probably a president of the United States says, I love fishing and I'm going to the Grand Canyon. I want to see if there's a good brown trout population down there. So they actually probably put them in milk cans and carried them down on burros and introduced them down there. So they've always kind of been in that background, but they just have never taken off like this.
What's usually the tipping point when you've got a species and you know that it's beginning to affect the balance of your ecosystem? What is that tipping point that makes you go, okay, we need to start taking action?
In the case of like quagga mussels and zebra mussels and that, it's the very first one. You get one female and one male quagga mussel, and that female can put 1 million babies, which is what happened in Lake Powell. And in less than 3 years, they were lake-wide because the little babies float around, then they attach. So in some cases, it's one. In other cases, you may have driven down into say a mountain valley, and you notice the whole hillside is a lovely white or a lovely yellow. My poor wife has to live with me. I'll say, oh, dang, that is not a native wildflower, because native wildflowers, there's usually a mix of different colors and species. They've learned to get along with each other. Typically, it's a knapweed or a thistle or a leafy spurge, something that escaped from somebody's flower garden, and suddenly now you've got 100,000 acres. And so one or two crayfish that aren't native to the area, give them a few years and they're feeding on eggs of all your trout and everything that you want there. They explode and they take off. So in the case of brown trout, when they were 2%, everyone was pretty comfortable with that. But when they start getting to 10 and 15% of the population, that means not just 100 of them are spawning every year. You're getting into thousands of them are spawning every year.
Wow. So that really does play into the leave no trace, right? Where it's not just please don't go off the path because you'll step on things, but don't go off the path because you might have a seed in your shoe or something like that.
Well, and the internet. So I lived up in Michigan. We had a very aggressive try to find those new plants and take care of them, because once they get down along the shorelines and that, they start wiping out endangered birds nesting cover. They start wiping out native little thistles and that are almost gone. So I went to the internet, and you can buy anything. And so sometimes you'll say that is a lovely little flower, but if it says it's from Africa, it doesn't need water, it doesn't care how much competition is going on around it, and it will spread and fill in your whole flower bed is within a year. That is a red flag to anybody to say, this little bugger, as soon as he jumps out of my flower bed, suddenly I've got 100 acres of it in the woods right behind my house, and then suddenly I have 100,000 acres of it. So the internet is a little scary on what you can buy.
I believe it. It's all about education, right? It's understanding how that, truly, they talk about the butterfly effect and how doing something in the past could change the future, but I've seen it said where you should think about what you do now and how that could affect 30 years from now, instead of thinking about, Doctor Who kind of stuff.
Well, and just keeping it, we love the native plant societies and those type of groups who recognize these are the beautiful plants that are supposed to be here and that grow well here and attract our local insects and everything. We love those, as opposed to the, you name it, what color of plant you want, how aggressive you want, we'll get it for you. We'll go find it. That's where it gets pretty scary.
Right. So with climate change, obviously we're looking at a future where these ideal conditions for plants and animals are going to change. Is there anything that you are doing that is preemptive to support these species at all? Or is it kind of a, as we move forward, kind of having to be a little bit more reactive about it?
So whenever we see a new species, some of the real tall grasses that you see in landscaping, Ravenna grass is similar to pampas grass and some of those. You can hike up the most remote canyons off of Lake Powell and see Ravenna grass clumps. You're just going, where in the heck did you come from? So we're trying to be aggressive on those. We currently are putting together a little management document for what we call hanging gardens. And if you're not familiar with those, that's where there's a seep coming out of the side of sandstone, and it grows ferns and flowers, which then attract little endemic bees that you only find in small areas. Glen Canyon National Recreation Area, going over into Canyonlands and up into Capitol Reef, we are the center for hanging gardens for the United States. They grow right off the sides of the rocks, and they're always kept wet. The reason they're always kept wet is because there's these big tanks and tinajas where rainwater collects up on top of the sandstone, and then it slowly percolates down through cracks in the sandstone. With climate change, we're looking, you look the last 2 summers, no monsoon period. So some of these hanging gardens may have had to go a couple months with absolutely no water flowing down into them. So then you lose all those wetland plants. So we're trying to identify some key areas and start monitoring that a little more, especially on years where we either get no snowpack or we don't get any monsoonal rains.
It looks like we do have another question. Is there a payout limit for brown trout, and what kind of turnout are you expecting?
Again, this is a brand new program. Some of the fishing tournaments have had hundreds to even up to 1,000 people show up for an actual fishing tournament. So we're just not sure how much interest there's going to be. I told you the rainbow trout fishery is kind of set up on a catch and release. So we have a whole bunch of anglers who really like to put the fish back for someone else to enjoy catching it the next time he's hungry enough to bite onto a fly that's not real. So so we're not sure yet how big a groups or how much participation. So over the first year, we have set it up on our webpage that we'll be tracking that by month. And so anybody can get on there and say, oh, look, in November, they had 100 fishermen. The word got out. Anglers started getting paid a little bit. So maybe December, January, we start seeing 200 anglers get out there. So we'll kind of watch through that. And currently, there's no limit on the payout. If the person with the question, if her spouse or his spouse is an avid fisherman and they don't see him for a month, don't get too mad at them. Maybe they're going to get a nice little payout. We have a little fun with this, and we also will have to, if we get somebody who just spends their whole life out there, we may have to start talking to IRS and a few others to make sure we're not not going over any kinds of limits. But for now, we're just figuring an angler will come out once or twice a month, catch 2 to 10, 15 trout, turn them in, and get a nice little check about the middle of the next month. So.
And you had said when we were talking before while we were planning this out, hadn't you said that this was a program they had done in Colorado or Utah where they saw success, or was that just the inspiration to start this?
There's a similar program. It's set up quite a bit different up on the Columbia River. And there's a native Columbia River pike minnow that's a predatory fish, not really sought after for either fishing or for eating, but it eats a lot of baby salmon that are floating down to the ocean. And so the anglers went and some of the agencies got together. And so they've been doing this for several years. And in that case, I'll just say some of the anglers have brought in over 6 figures.
Holy cow.
We're not anticipating anything close to that, but Columbia River is a very large river, and there are a lot of pike minnow out there, and a few of the anglers have figured out, they've geared up their boats and they go catch them like crazy, figured out what baits to use on them and everything else. So
wow.
So that's a little different program and has a really specific goal of making it safer for small salmon to be able to float back down to the ocean and start growing big. So.
Well, that's awesome. Well, it's cool to know that we have our own extremely unique program in Northern Arizona. So hopefully you'll get a ton of people who are super interested and it'll work out exactly the way you're hoping for. So, yeah.
And our goal is to help a whole bunch of marriages, because the husband will come home and say, I turned in 8 fish. I'm getting a check at the end of the month, and the wife will no longer say, oh, you're wasting your time fishing all the time. Just kidding. You can erase that off the tape if you want.
Well, and with that, it doesn't look like I have any other questions on here. If you joined us a little bit late, this was recorded, so we'll be sharing this on our YouTube channel. I'll be sending the link out to everybody after we're all done here. I'll also be sending out an email with links that were referenced during the presentation. And thank you all so much for joining us. And of course, thank you, Ken, for your time, for sharing your expertise with us, because this was fascinating in our little corner of Arizona. There's so many things that, you know, a lot of us don't know about. So awesome opportunity. Thank you so much for doing this for us. And I wish you all the best. And I hope everyone has a great day. Stay safe. Enjoy yourselves, and I hope to see you soon at another event. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. Thank you.